They called it impossible, but today the water is flowing. 1.6 billion gallons today. 5.2 billion in just 3 days. A long-fought victory that could have stopped the fires, if only they had listened 6 years ago. What really happened? And why was this kept from you for so long? Stay with me, this story will shock you. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, aching kind. The kind that comes when the land is screaming for help, and no one is listening. California had suffered. The wildfires had taken everything: homes, animals, history. The elderly wept as they watched the news, seeing the land they had lived on for decades turn to ash. 86-year-old Martha Jenkins sat on her porch holding a burnt photo frame. It was the only thing she had left from the house where she raised her children. "If only the water had come sooner," she whispered, her voice shaking. Meanwhile, deep in the control rooms of California's water management, a group of engineers stared at their screens. The numbers didn't lie. 1.6 billion gallons of water were now flowing. In 3 days, it would be 5.2 billion gallons. Donald Trump, the man people loved or hated, had posted on X, "Photo of beautiful water flow that I just opened in California. Everybody should be happy about this long-fought victory. I only wish they listened to me 6 years ago. There would have been no fire." For some, it was a political statement. For others, it was a painful reminder. Martha wiped her tears. Could my home have been saved? The answer was terrifying. 6 years earlier, in 2018, the winds were stronger. Scientists warned of wildfires, but no one acted fast enough. One man had seen it coming. Elon Musk, the billionaire genius, had spoken about fire-resistant homes and water supply solutions. "We can prevent this," he had said. "We must act now." He had the resources. He had the ideas. But bureaucracy was slow. California's leaders had ignored the warnings. At the same time, former President Donald Trump had spoken about water being held back by regulations. "Open the water," he had said. "California doesn't have to burn." But politics got in the way. Then the fires came. Over 85 people died in the Camp Fire of 2018, the deadliest in California history. The air was thick with ash. The land became a graveyard. 6 years later, as the water finally flowed, tears replaced flames. Martha stared at the TV. Her husband had died in that fire. If the water had come earlier, he would still be here. She wasn't the only one mourning. The night before the Camp Fire destroyed Paradise, California, James Henderson, a retired firefighter, left his daughter a voicemail. "Sweetheart, don't worry, the fire is close, but we'll be fine. The wind is strong, but they'll send help soon. I love you." She never got to say goodbye. The fire moved at 80 football fields per minute. Families ran, but the flames ran faster. James never made it out. Now, as the water finally flowed, James's daughter Linda fell to her knees. "Dad, why now? Why too late?" she sobbed. Her hands trembled as she read Trump's post. There would have been no fire. Was it true? Could her father still be alive? The truth was painful. The water had always been there. It had just been held back. Linda closed her eyes. The sound of rushing water filled her ears. For some, it was a blessing. For her, it was a cruel joke. The night sky in Paradise, California had turned orange. Not from the setting sun, but from the flames that swallowed homes in minutes. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California, stood on his balcony in Los Angeles watching the news. His fists clenched. He had spent years warning about wildfires, pushing for better water management. Now he watched his people suffer. "Why didn't they listen?" he muttered, his thick Austrian accent barely hiding the pain. The fire had destroyed over 18,000 structures. Families were running for their lives. Old men and women who had built California with their hands were now homeless. Arnold picked up his phone. He called an old friend, Donald Trump. "Donald, I'm watching the news, it's bad," he said. Trump sighed. "Arnold, I told them 6 years ago, open the water, but they didn't listen. Now in 2024, water was finally flowing, but it came too late for the 85 people who had died in 2018. Arnold wiped his eyes. He was a strong man, but that night, even he couldn't hold back his tears. It was a school day, just like any other. 8-year-old Tommy Carter had packed his favorite red backpack. It was November 8, 2018, the day Paradise, California became hell on earth. Gloria Thompson, a 74-year-old grandmother, was home alone. Her children had moved away, but they called her every morning. That day she waited by the phone. But the call never came. Instead, she heard something else. Sirens, screams, and the sound of cracking wood. Her television showed live footage of the fire. The words on the screen made her heart stop. Campfire spreads uncontrollably. Thousands evacuating. She grabbed her cane and tried to leave. But when she opened the door, the sky was black, the air too thick to breathe. She tried calling 911, but no one answered. Her hands trembled as she dialed her son's number. Please pick up, please pick up. But the fire didn't wait. 6 years later, her son sat in his living room staring at Trump's post. I only wish they listened to me 6 years ago. There would have been no fire. Tears rolled down his face because he never got to say goodbye. In 2018, Elon Musk had warned of the fires. He had talked about building underground water tunnels. He had even tweeted, "California needs better water control. Fires are preventable." But no one listened. At the same time, Donald Trump had argued that environmental laws were blocking water from flowing freely. "Open the water," he had said. "The state doesn't have to burn." But politics got in the way. Then the fire came. It was the deadliest wildfire in California history. 85 people died. Thousands lost everything. Now, 6 years later, the water was finally flowing. Musk sat in his office scrolling through Trump's post. 1.6 billion gallons of water today, 5.2 billion in 3 days. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. If they had done this earlier, how many lives could we have saved? The answer was too painful to think about. She was only 5 years old. Her name was Emily Brooks, and she had just learned how to write her name. On the morning of the fire, she held her pink teddy bear and waited for her mom to pick her up from daycare. Then the teachers smelled smoke. The fire was too fast. The roads were blocked. The daycare workers did their best, but there was nowhere to run. Emily's mother, Jessica, was stuck in traffic. She saw the smoke rise from the hills. Her phone rang. It was the daycare. "Jessica, we can't get out," Jessica screamed. She left her car in the middle of the road and ran on foot, but she never made it in time. 6 years later, Jessica sat in front of her TV, watching Trump's announcement about the water. There would have been no fire. She covered her mouth as she sobbed uncontrollably. Because the water came. But her little girl never would. November 8, 2018, the day fire swallowed Paradise, California. John Martinez, a 53-year-old veteran, had just sat down for breakfast when he got the call. "Dad, the fire's here, we're trapped." It was his daughter, Maria, calling from home. John dropped everything and jumped into his truck. His hands shook as he drove towards their house. The closer he got, the thicker the smoke became. The road was jammed with cars. People honked, screamed, begged to move forward. But the flames were faster than the traffic. John couldn't wait. He jumped out of his truck and ran on foot, covering his mouth with his shirt. He ran past burning houses, past cars melting from the heat. Then he saw their home. It was on fire. "Maria, Maria," he screamed. No answer. He kicked open the door, but inside, there was only smoke and silence. 6 years later, he saw Trump's post about the water. There would have been no fire. John stared at the screen, his heart crushing under the weight of those words. If only, if only. The fire had reached Feather River Hospital. Patients were trapped inside. Nurses and doctors tried to evacuate, but time was running out. Catherine Williams, 58, had worked as a nurse for over 30 years. That day, she made a choice. "I'll stay. She told her colleagues, "Go save who you can. I'll help those who can't move." Smoke filled the halls. Flames crept closer. She held the hand of an elderly patient who couldn't walk. "We'll be okay," she whispered, but she knew they wouldn't. Hours later, firefighters found her. She was lying on top of her patient, shielding him from the flames. Both of them were gone. In 2024, her son David watched Trump's announcement about the water. Long-fought victory. David threw his phone across the room. His mother had fought too, but no victory brought her back. His hands shook with grief, because the water came. But his mother never would. Tom Jefferson, 81, had lived in Paradise, California his whole life. He had built his house with his own hands, raised his children there, buried his wife in the town cemetery. When the fire came, he refused to leave. "I won't abandon my home," he told his family. His granddaughter Lena begged him to escape. "Grandpa, please," she cried over the phone. But Tom was old, tired. He had seen too much. "If this is how I go, so be it," he said softly. The last time anyone heard from him, he was sitting on his porch, humming his wife's favorite song. The fire took him that night. In 2024, Lena sat in her apartment watching Trump's post. "If only they listened to me 6 years ago, there would have been no fire." She dropped her phone and sobbed into her hands. Because the water came. But her grandfather was gone forever. Jake Carter, 42 years old, had been a firefighter for nearly 20 years. On November 8, 2018, he kissed his wife and kids goodbye, promising to return after his shift. But the fire didn't care about promises. As Paradise burned, Jake and his team were trapped on a narrow road surrounded by flames. "We can't get out," his last radio message said. Then, silence. His wife, Rachel, waited by the window all night praying for his return. By morning, she got the news. Jake never made it home. In 2024, Rachel scrolled through Trump's post. There would have been no fire. Her hands shook. If they had listened, if the water had come earlier, maybe Jake would still be tucking their kids into bed. Tears blurred her vision. Because the water came. But her husband never would. Bill Anderson was 66 years old when the fire destroyed Paradise. He had worked 40 years as a carpenter, building the town he loved. When the flames came, he had 5 minutes to escape. He grabbed nothing, just his dog and his truck keys. Everything else? Gone. He spent months in a shelter trying to rebuild his life. Then, in 2020, floods hit California. Without the trees and soil to hold water, Paradise was drowning in mudslides and debris. Bill lost everything, again. 6 years later, he watched Trump's post about the water. 1.6 billion gallons today, 5.2 billion in 3 days. His hands trembled. Why now? Why not then? His house could have been saved. His memories could have survived. But now, all he had was pain. In 2018, Donald Trump had warned about California's water crisis. There's plenty of water, but it's being kept from flowing, he had said. If they managed it right, there would be no fires. But his words were mocked. News outlets laughed. Critics called him wrong. Lawsuits blocked action. Then, the campfire came. 85 lives lost. Now, in 2024, the water was finally flowing. Trump had been right all along. As people scrolled through his post, some wept for what was lost. Others felt anger at those who ignored the warnings, because the water came. But Paradise was already gone. Tom Harrison was 72 years old. He had lived in Paradise for over 50 years. He built his house with his own hands, raised 4 kids there, watched his grandkids play in the yard. Then, in 2018, the fire came. Flames devoured everything. Memories, dreams, life. Tom escaped with only the clothes on his back. For years, he lived in a trailer waiting for hope. But help never came. 6 years later, as he scrolled through Trump's post, his heart ached. If they listened 6 years ago, there would have been no fire. His eyes filled with tears. He closed his phone and stared at the empty land where his home used to be. Then, he made a decision. He would rebuild. Because paradise wasn't just a place. It was home. Martha Jenkins was 81 years old. She lived alone. Her husband had passed away 2 months before the fire. On the morning of November 8, 2018, she sat down to write a letter to her grandson. "Dear David, I miss you so much." She never finished. The fire took her before she could escape. Years later, David, now 28, visited the ruins of her home. As he knelt in the ashes, he found something. A piece of burned paper. It had only 2 words left. "Love, Grandma." Tears streamed down his face. The water had finally come, but Grandma was already gone. 6 years had passed. The water was finally flowing. 1.6 billion gallons. Soon, 5.2 billion. Trump had warned them. Nobody listened. Now paradise was a ghost town. But something had changed. Survivors started coming back. Tom picked up his hammer. Rachel visited her husband's memorial. David held his grandmother's last words close to his heart. And across the country, people watched the news, tears streaming down their faces. The past could not be undone. But hope was rising. The water that came too late was now a sign of a new beginning. Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, like if you wish things had been different. Comment if this story made you cry. Subscribe if you believe in second chances. Because history must never repeat itself, let's keep these stories alive.